So the government, through the Governor General, is going to be putting out, it seems, some legislation aimed at regulating social media companies, but along with that is going to be tackling online hate. Now, as someone who worked in the field of combating racism and discrimination and therefore tackling online hate, I thought I would maybe bring up some of the statements that they said and look at some of the legislation and see if we can figure out what that might look like if it were actually to come into play. So as always, let's just jump right in, and here we have the actual story itself. The key line here is that the section addressing systemic racism, the Liberals made reference to taking action on online hate. So what does that mean? That's obviously part of a package with regulating social media companies. There's going to be a requirement for some additional legislation. You can't just have ones about online hate speech because we already do have laws about hate speech in this country. Now, many people tend to be stuck on the sort of American idea of free speech, but here we actually do have hate speech laws and hate propaganda laws in Canada. And so you're maybe going to need some other legislative items if you're going to want to actually regulate what social media companies do. There might be certain factors. Is the server in Canada? Are all the people Canadian? What legal leverage do they have, or what jurisdiction do they have over these companies? So there's a lot really there that the government might need to do to implement whatever it is that they actually want to do. Now, importantly, here is going to be the actual criminal code, which covers the hate crimes and the hate propaganda that these people would be charged with, and so I thought it would be important to pull that up. Now, the relevant sections here are sections 318 and 319. The thing to know about these sections, though, is that attorneys general are very, very reluctant to bring forward charges with either of these two sections, and you'll see why in a second. That's often because it's very difficult to get a conviction, and so they don't want to necessarily bring charges which would then get tossed out or result in not getting a conviction, because that would set the wrong precedent. So in a certain way, the fact that these lines exist doesn't mean that they're always used or always going to be used. Now, I want to start off with the first one here. It's hate propaganda advocating genocide, and this one, the only real difference is the genocide can be in whole or in part. You can see right here, in whole or in part. So it's not the maybe colloquial genocide. It's you can, for example, if you killed one or two people of an identifiable group and you said, I want to kill all the members of this group, you could still be charged with advocating that, or actually engaging in it. But definitely, if you talk about it, you can be charged with advocating that, even though you might have only killed one or two people. So I think that's maybe a little bit of a definition in the legalese to maybe the colloquial usage of genocide. If someone killed one or two people of an identifiable minority group or an identifiable group generally, you might just say that's a hate crime, that's a racist hate crime, that's murder. You wouldn't necessarily think of it as genocide, but legally, again, advocating that could definitely fall here under genocide. Identifiable group, that's pretty much anything. These are all the criterions which someone could be identified with, and I think pretty much everyone in Canada would fall into at the very least one, if not numerous, of these categories. It would be very hard to say that there is no way that some person can be an identifiable group, which begs a lot of questions about advocating for the destruction of certain groups, and why is nobody charging anyone with this? So again, a lot of questions there to unpack. 319 is more about the actual speech, and this is the communicating statements in a public place. Now, if we're talking about social media, then you might say, okay, well, the public place is going to be maybe my Facebook wall, it's going to be your Twitter profile. So if I make a tweet about these type of things, is that now a public place according to what these new laws and regulations might have in mind? I mean, these are definitely public, and you could definitely argue that the internet is a public place of dialogue. So, it's definitely easy there. I'm not quite sure what the case law is. There might be some existing case law with regards to this, but definitely it's easy to see where this type of thing would come from if there was going to be some new legislation. The other one here, willful promotion of hatred. So, I guess that's different than maybe public incitement of hatred. This is a willful promotion. It's the same kind of thing, but you're going to communicate statements that promote hatred against an identifiable group. Almost repetition here, but I think this one is really, you're advocating something like, I'm promoting hatred against a group, and therefore someone is going to go do something. I'm promoting hatred against Jews, for example, and therefore someone is going to go do something, vandalize a synagogue, or beat up someone who is Jewish, and so that's maybe the breach of the peace here. That's part one. Whereas the willful promotion of hatred doesn't have to be that someone is actually going to go do something. Now, I think this is the one that maybe a lot of people are upset with, because if you're just willfully promoting hatred, so I'm just saying I hate this group, or that people should hate this group, a lot of people who are really, really diehard free speech advocates would say, well, you know, you can't have a law like this because I should be allowed to say whatever I want. I should be allowed to be as hateful as I want. And so this is maybe that slippery slope that some of the people who are against this type of thing would be warning against or pointing to as a section. Now, there are obviously defenses for this section. So, for example, if what you said was true, that's, again, you know, it's up for debate what is true according to facts, statistics, you know, true from a certain angle, from a certain perspective, you know, a lot of stuff that could be muddied in there. If you know, are trying to talk about religious texts, it's also kind of weird, you know, things open for interpretation here in this, in section B here, and attempting to establish by an argument an opinion on a religious subject, or an opinion based on belief in a religious text. So a lot of stuff there. If the statements were relevant to any subject of public interest. Now, all this stuff, you know, as I'm talking, it really, there's a lot of stuff to unpack here. But I think one thing is clear from looking at these things. It's that the government, on our current legislation, so on our current laws that are on the books, there's a lot that they could do. The issue is really, what is the case law? So what is the history that shows how people have been charged, what has happened to these people, and what can the government do going forward? And that really depends how else they want to regulate. It is entirely possible that some of the other regulations might be backdoored through some of these hate speech things, saying that the government must crack down on speech, because hate speech is such a broad subject open to interpretation. Maybe that's one of the ways that they might get some of this jurisdiction, or put some of these rules on social media companies and be able to regulate what type of content they put out. I know that in the United States, a lot of conservatives have been complaining that they have been silenced in certain ways, saying that their, for example, pro-Trump things have been flagged for hate speech. Maybe some of the things that they're saying about the Democrats have also been flagged for hate speech. So again, a lot of this stuff is very, very open. A lot of this stuff is very complicated, but it does exist on the books, and I think there's going to be a lot to talk about. So I hope that kind of provided a really, really brief overview of the subject. I'm happy to talk about this in further detail, because there is definitely a lot to talk about. But the main takeaways, again, are that we do have hate speech laws in this country. They do exist and cover a lot of things, so it's definitely interesting to take a look at. But they are very rarely used, because attorneys general do not want to go ahead with a charge if they're not very, very sure that they're going to get a conviction. So a lot of interesting stuff to take away from, and maybe a bit of a different angle than you've heard about the throne speech. So hopefully you found that very interesting and entertaining. So for True North, I am Sam Eskenasi. I hope you very, very much enjoyed this video, and have yourselves a great day and a great evening. Thanks.